Hello, I'm Allison Merker-Garner, and this is Musical Minds Volume 4. It's a class for advanced students, and it is for violin, viola, cello, and piano. The book looks like this. It's a 3-book set, text, reading, and resource. And I also have a string quartet chamber book and a piano trio chamber book that go along with this level. This is classical and early romantic period. So just to place this in context a little bit, the Baroque period technically ends 1750, and the Romantic period technically begins 1820. Think of what's happening in the world during those dates between 1750 and say 1850. There's a lot of unrest, a lot of social and political uprising, fighting for independence. There are lots of revolutions going on, people questioning the old ways and the old patriarchy and royalty. So the culture reflects that. The artwork, the music, the dance, all of that is celebrating patriotism, celebrating your roots, celebrating the country you come from, the culture that you have there. And so we're less interested in following the rules, and we're getting more interested in breaking them. So, for example, we have painting from the early Romantic period with Gainsborough in England, and the French Rococo period with Fragonard. And look at all the different things that are that really make this period unique. We have themes that are not grandiose, they're not theatrical, nothing dramatic. The colors are getting lighter and we've got more shades. Shapes and forms are still identifiable, but the brush strokes are a little blurry. Leave a little bit to imagination, trying to capture light and shadow is more important than the subject matter. And what is the subject matter? One's a portrait and one's kind of a frivolous little kick off the shoe and somebody catching it game. So it's not serious like we had in the Renaissance and in the Baroque periods. So that's the context in which we're working now, and composers are composing. So we're going to start out today with a piece of music that we're going to compare with what we did in Musical Minds 3. In Musical Minds 3, we looked at a chaconne bass line, and that provided the underpinning for the harmonic progression and the melody in Handel's chaconne. Is a chaconne bass line. And this piece that we're about to look at, we have this instead. Which was also in that Handel chaconne. We had the chaconne bass, and then we had 1-4-5-1 cadence. Well, that's what we have here in this piece. We're going to look at the theme for the theme and variations movement of the string quartet, Opus 76, number 3, by Haydn. And the melody is fairly commonly heard. You might have heard it before. It sounds like this. So we have accompanying that one, which is our G note, our 4-chord C, D for the dominant, and back to 1 on the tonic. So let's either sing or play that. G, C, D, G. Again. Every variation in this piece also is accompanied by 1, 4, 5, 1. So I'm going to play that melody again and see if you can follow, just by ear, when to change to a 4, a 5, or a 1. We're going to start with your G, 1. So we start with 1, and I think we go to a 4 here, and then to a 5, 1. So that's how I would harmonize it. And we're going to listen to it in a minute, and we'll see how close we are to that. But before we do that, isn't that odd? We end on that dominant. We end on that D major. It's called a half cadence when we don't. And then we stop. We end on a 5 or a dominant function there. So what happens next, we stay in the dominant, so we end with our dominant here, and then we're back to the tonic. So let's listen to this and listen to how we're starting to push the harmony a little bit and move toward that dominant or new key, the D major, but not fully in that key. We're just touching on it. So this particular performance, we're just going to listen to the theme and not the variations, but I urge you to listen to the variations. I think they're worth hearing this and how Haydn does variation form. It's very different than what we did with the Handel. So it's interesting. But we're going to just do the theme, and the performance is done by students. So they do a lovely job. So here we go. All right, my arms got a little tired in that one. And so one thing I wonder if you notice is the phrasing. The phrasing takes so long now. We don't have that 2-bar, 2-bar, 4-bar thing going on that we had in the Baroque period. We have something much longer that goes with the full arm and then with another full arm. So as you're listening to some of these that we're doing today, just see if you can follow the phrase and don't let your arm go down until that phrase has been finished, and then you're already into the next one. And you'll find that you have to use your full arm and not just your wrists this time. So could you hear that we were going into something a little bit brighter here? And then back to G. Okay, so that is in the reading book, page 46. If you have the books, you want to look at it. It's in there. We're going to move on and look at how this using the dominant evolves through the classical period and the romantic period. So the next piece we're going to look at are not in my books. I'm using a couple of pieces that you might be working on. So the next one is for violin. It's called Air Varie, number 14 in G. It's by Berio. And it is a theme and variations. The beginning sounds like this. That's the theme. Nothing much to it. But then there are many variations. And the variations, I'll play a recording of it. But the variations get more and more complex as the piece progresses. However, the harmony is the same progression over and over. Now here's something Berio has done. I guess he's Berio has done that has added a little bit of interest to our dominant chord, and that is he's added a 7th. So we're going to try something before we listen. We're going to do a 5 chord, and we're going to do a 5-7 chord. So here's your 5 chord. Play D, F sharp, and A. Let's do that again. D, F sharp, A. That is your 5 chord in the key of G, and this is in G. So let's do that. And then we're going to do the first inversion. F sharp, A, D. And then the second inversion is A, D, F sharp. And then we're back to D, F sharp, A. Okay? So you've just done all the inversions, we call that, for D major. Now let's do the 7 chord. Now the 7 chord is called that because we add another third on top, and the distance between the bottom note and the top note is a 7th. It's almost an octave, but not quite. So what is that top note? It's a C. So we're going to play D, F sharp, A, C. Let's do that again. D, F sharp, A, C. And you can do those in inversions too. We can do F sharp, A, C, D, or A, C, D, F sharp, or C, D, F sharp, A, or go back to where we started. So those are good to practice because we get all of those inversions in these chord progressions to make them smooth. So we have a 5-7 chord in this. So I want you to listen for that. It's at the end of the fourth measure. And I will play you a recording of this. Here. So here's what it sounds like. One, then 5-7. 1, 5, 4, 5, 7, 1. So you can hear that it's one variation right after the other, but it's harmonized the same way. Now let's look at another piece. This one is by Mozart, and you may be familiar with it. It's the first piece in book 7 in the Suzuki books. So it's the Mozart Piano Sonata number 11 in A major. We're going to listen to it. It is a theme and variations as well. We're going to listen to the theme. Daniel Barenboim is the pianist. So it is followed by a number of variations. So we just listened to the theme. So here we go again. We're in A major now instead of G major. So find your A. Okay, we're going to play an A. We're going to play an E. Sorry, D. And then E. And then back to A. Let's do that again for me. A, D, E, and then A. So in this piece, we start with the A, and then 5/7, and then 4, back to 5, 1, and then this is a little bit of a 4, and it ends on a 5. Because we're about to go back to 1. 5, and then 4, 5, on our 1. Pretty straightforward there. And you can take a recording and just play the A's, the D's, and the E's by ear with that, and it's great ear training. So the next part here, we're going to add a new chord. So for right now, we're just going to do A's and E's. That's all we're going to do. And see if you can figure out where we're going with this. Okay, so A's and E's just harmonize with my melody. What happened there? There wasn't an A or an E that really worked well with this. I mean, I guess maybe, but not completely when we did this. What did we do? Well, we had to set up that 5 that we ended on, and we did it by playing the 5 of that key. So what's the 5 note in the key of E major? B. So we had a B major chord there. That's called a secondary dominant, because we went to the dominant of the original key from G major to D major, and then we went from D major to A major and A to E, and then we went from E major to B. So we went another jump, and that required an accidental to be able to play that 5 of 5 there. Then we're back to 1. So Mozart here is pushing that 5/7 even a little further into chromaticism by doing a secondary dominant. That's what I'm after on that. So now we've done that. We're going to look at some things that I have in my textbook, if you have that book and want to follow. On page 56, I have classical period chord progressions. So I have it scored for piano quartet. So if you're playing in an ensemble or you want to bring some other friends together, you could also just do the piano part and still get the sound of the chords. But we're in C major here. Here's the first progression. C, that's 1, 5, 5 of 5. And then 5, and then 1. So all of these progressions in here are playing with that secondary dominant. Now, we did half cadences ending on 5s. I also do ending on 6s, which is called deceptive cadence, and there's some of those in here too. So for the simplicity of this video, I'm lifting some of that out. So now I'm on page 132 and going into chromatic baseline progressions. Now this gets into the Romantic period. So in this case, we could use a 5/7 or we could use a diminished chord. And there is one diminished chord in a major scale. In Musical Minds 1, I think it's in the 3rd unit, or the subunit in the 2nd unit, but the 3rd A major. I go into the chords in major and minor, and the chords that we've been doing are major, for a major key, 1, 4, and 5. We haven't done any of the others, but some of the others are minor, and there's one that's diminished. Here are the minor chords, 2, 3, and 6, but the diminished chord is the 7 chord. It has more tension in it than any of the other chords. It's made up of 2 minor thirds, if you're curious. So this particular progression has a chromatic bass line. So we go up it with half steps, but we're doing a 1, and then a 7 of 2, and then 2, and a 7 of 3, and on up. And so when we get into the Romantic period, we just go through all of that. We go into secondary, not just dominance, but we go into the 5 of 2, or the 7 chord of 3. And that's not anything you have to know, but just hearing it, you can tell that we're not staying in the same place anymore, but we're going up by half steps a lot more. And there are names for that. And it's usually having to do with secondary sevenths or dominance. So the last piece that we're going to look at is the trout, and that is on page 144 of your textbook. This is the piano quintet theme and variation movement, which is movement 4, from Schubert's opus 114, The Trout. And the trout, it gets its name from a song, a piece of lieder that Schubert wrote that has this melody. And he took that melody from the song he wrote and made it the theme for this movement. And that piece involves a trout. So it's about as complicated as that. So it's often called the trout. And the 4th movement is the famous one. You always hear the theme and then all the variations. Now, Schubert was a romantic composer. He was an early romantic composer. So we've moved through the classical period, and we're into firmly into romanticism now. And I will play a recording of this, but before I do that, let's listen for a few things. The theme of this So the melody in the theme is in the first violin. And the piano doesn't play, it's all string quartet. And everybody else, the viola, the second violin, the cello, they're just accompanying. But when we get into the variations, which I urge you to listen to, the first variation, the melody is in the piano part. And then when we get into, I don't have it in front of me, I think variation 2, it's in the viola. And then variation 3 or 4 has cello and viola. So everybody gets a turn playing the melody, and everybody gets a turn playing the harmony. It's just in variation form. And listening to that's interesting, just like with the Handel and Haydn, to hear how a romantic composer, Schubert, handles variation is much more intricate and complex than even the Haydn and certainly the Handel. And we're starting to really explore rhythmic complexities and harmonic complexities and melodic phrasing that lasts much longer, and ornamentation, it's much more involved. So before we listen to it, let's look at the chords. So we're in D major here. So let's play our 1 4 5 1 in D major just to get into the key. So we start with a D, and then down to G, and then up to A, and back to D. So D, G, A, D are the notes that I want you to use while I play the melody, and see if you can come up with the harmony. I have a pickup note, and then you come in on D. Ready, go. Again, D, A, okay, and I played an E, but you could do, let's see, that's an E major chord. Oh my goodness. What has happened here? E is the 5 of A, not of D. It's a secondary 5/7 chord. So that cadence is a cadence to end in A major. So let's play E here. E, and then end on A. A, so we do end on D, but we have some 4s in there. Did you notice that? But no more secondary dominance. We didn't have that. So let's listen to the recording of this and listen for the secondary dominant that happens. And if you want to play along with the notes that we know for D major, D, G, A, D, except for that one secondary dominant E we can do, that would be great. So here's the trout, and we're just going to do the theme and a little bit maybe of the variation one so you hear how that goes. There's your 5 of 5. Piano has the melody. Viola has the melody. Cello does too, actually. One thing that's really unusual about this particular quintet, instead of having two violins, viola, and cello, it has a violin, viola, cello, and double bass. So setup's a little different, but it really does give that sense of fullness to the sound, I think, to have the double bass there. Cello has it now. So this gives you an idea of how much more latitude the composers from the Romantic period had compared to the ones that we heard in the Baroque period. So the trout is the last thing that I wanted to get to today in your class. If you wanted to supplement this with your own chamber music experience, you could do the opening of Trout. It's written in the reading and textbooks, and that would be helpful. I also have some Mozart sonatas, not sonatas, string quartets that are available, and in the chamber books, I have for the string quartets, Cherubini String Quartet, Haydn String Quartet, The Bird, Mendelssohn String Quartet, Canzonetta, several more Mozart string quartets, Schubert String Quartet, Rosamund, Andante, and the Beethoven Opus 18, number 2. So all of those are varying difficulty. So some of them are going to be harder than others. You can just meet your own needs on that. The trio book, I have J.C. Bach D major trio, and then a Haydn trio, piano trio Allegretto from Mozart, and then some what we call salon music that are lighter in character and usually have a descriptive title and not just a formal title. So I have Schubert and some Dvorak Slavic dances, and Wagner, and Gurlitt miniature trios, Wolfart trio, Rennick trio, and Carl Bohm trio. So once again, varying difficulty in these, but you can certainly find something that supports what we've done in these books. They're also introduced in the chamber books within the context of what we've been working on. So there's an introduction that gives a little bit of history and a little bit about the genre, and then the piece and how to practice it in rehearsal and how to perform it, what the performance practice would be that's appropriate. So that would round out what we do in the first 3 books. So that gives you some idea of Musical Minds 4, Thank you very much.